We already got people waiting for us. This is good.
Yeah, hell yeah.
This is good.
I was gonna say I think the world.
And they're claiming first in the chat already. You guys just calm down, everybody. Be patient. We're here. Sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, the world is a much worse place than it was last week.
Dude, you see, this is why I love you. You read my mind. I was just going to say that. That was my whole, and a lot more, of course, since that's what I do. But wow, yes. Well, what about that though? How are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, since Boston won another championship.
God, that is so racist. It's just disgusting to me. Although not anymore. Now it's a black team, but it's funny. Still in my mind, the Celtics are like that old Celtics. I mean, it was pretty clearly racist. Like they would go way out of their way to find white players, and we know that Boston was, and maybe still is, but certainly was when I was growing up. It just was like palpably a more racist city, maybe than any other in this country that I've ever been to. Far more racist than like southern cities.
Bill Russell. Bill Russell wins 10 championships, and you still get what is it? He still gets his home vandalized and all that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, the Southie culture is real. It's nasty. I'm not a fan. That's a city I'd never really want to live in. But yeah. So the Celtics. Congrats, I guess. Is that because you're Caucasian? Why are you celebrating? You live in Indiana.
I'm not so.
Because of Indiana. Oh, Indiana's the other. That's the center of racist basketball. I forgot. Right. Of course, you're the people who gave us Larry Bird.
Yeah.
No, actually, I don't mean that at all. I love it when we have awesome white basketball players, and I think Larry Bird is clearly the third best player of all time.
Yeah. I wanted Kyrie to win one though.
After the two black guys.
Yeah. Well. No, okay.
What?
I mean, long story, but I was gonna say I wanted Kyrie to win a championship. He already won one for the flat earthers. Now he needs to win one for the anti-vaxxers.
He's also down with Palestine.
Yeah.
He wore a keffiyeh when the war started. Yep. Oh my God. Speaking of the Celtics and politics and taking shocking positions on things. Jaylen Brown. Do you know that Jaylen Brown is a Foucauldian?
What?
Like a legit Foucauldian. Everybody right now go on YouTube and type in Jaylen. I think it's Jay. Am I right? Len? Yeah. There's everybody's named Jaylen in the NBA and they all have different spellings. I think that's his spelling. Brown, Foucault. Do it. He gives a lecture without notes. He gives a lecture without notes at UC Berkeley, his alma mater. But like when he was just a few years ago, when he was out and gone, without notes, he gave a lecture on panopticism.
Yeah.
And Foucault, I swear to God, he knows it. He gets it. He's quite good at presenting it. Like I was like, you're kidding me. Because he's not just a basketball player. He's one of the top 20 basketball players in the world. And he's the world champion right now. And this guy, but he somehow had time and the interest. I never had I had a lot of athlete students when I was teaching. A lot. Some of them got into stuff and I loved them. They were great students, but they never really got as deep as Jaylen Brown did into Foucault, where he's got it in the back of his mind. I mean, it's without notes. Everybody go give Jaylen love on that one. I have to be his fan from that for forever. I won't be a Celtics fan.
Yeah.
But I have to be a Jaylen Brown fan. So there you go.
That's a good Goodwill Hunting story right there. So. It
is, right?
Yes.
He must be dumb. He's a black NBA player.
Yeah.
What could he know about Foucault?
Yeah.
He's super awesome, actually. Yeah.
There was a rejected sketch idea for Mad TV. I think Artie Lang pitched it, and the idea was Goodwill Smith, and it was a black version of Goodwill Hunting. But the equation on the board was 2 + 2, and nobody at this HBCU could solve it until.
Damn.
Yeah.
Okay, now.
That never made the air for some reason.
You know what? That's funny. What's funny is that could be a Key and Peele sketch.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they did that pretty good series of sketches about black names in sports. which if anybody white had done that, I mean, it's over.
Mhm.
But they got away with it, and everybody loved it. So I think
Yeah.
they could make racist jokes like that.
Jim Goad said he's a black supremacist when it comes to naming things. So
I think Jim Goad's thinking on race is worthy of like at least a scholarly article, if not an entire book. Like, he has his own very particular, very interesting, intelligent, though racist, ideology. Basically, I mean, it's a worldview, it's a set of ideas, but Jim Goad is one of the most interesting people to talk to about race. Even though he's a flat out racist. I mean, technically. I mean, according to like standard definitions of it, I think he denies. Does he deny it? I'm not sure, but I don't care though. See, this is what people don't get. That doesn't bother me one bit. I just don't want it enacted in policy. But to float ideas around about the genetic differences among purported races of human beings, which right there is just such a preposterous idea, but I'm here for it. In fact, I've been looking for smart racists for a long time, as you know, to be on the show, to interview. And I've actually found 2 who might be good. Well, Steve Saylor, I'd love to have on the show, and I'm not sure I can get him. I don't know if you trust me, although I am to be trusted in this. But yeah, there's a couple other guys who don't show their faces. They're on YouTube. They're not famous, but they're quite smart. And I might have them on to debate like real scientific racism. No, it's fascinating stuff, and it's fascinating because it's been squelched for decades. I mean, you weren't even allowed to entertain the thought.
Yeah.
And I reject it completely, not out of moral grounds, because it makes no sense to me, Yeah. But, there have been, I think, a few what I would call serious intellectuals. I think Jared Taylor is barely serious intellectual. I think there's actually some better people out there doing this stuff. I mean, Charles Murray, I guess, would be the first one, and his co-author, I forget his name, Herenstein, something like that, Herenstein. But then since the bell curve, there have been, not just on the alt-right, not just frog Twitter, but there's some actual people with academic credentials who have like not been able to do this in academia, of course, but they become anonymous and they start publishing on their own stuff that essentially argues on behalf of what we used to call, 19th century or scientific racism. The real base level racism, like the real deal stuff, like what Thomas Jefferson says in Notes on the State of Virginia to justify owning slaves. He goes on in great detail about the physical differences, the innate, natural, physical, biological differences between blacks and whites, and how that makes blacks more suitable to slavery and less able to be full citizens and all the rest of it. And then whites, of course, are more beautiful and more intelligent and more emotionally stable and all the rest of it because of their physiognomy, because of their physical nature. So that's, it's fascinating stuff. I love reading the old racists. I love reading Jefferson's Notes in the State of Virginia. I love reading the great slave apologists from the Old South, like George Fitzhugh and John C. Calhoun. They're really smart and interesting. I mean, incredible minds. And it's just interesting to see how they work with this relatively new concept of race and racism, which was new in the 18th and 19th centuries as a doctrine, as a scientific doctrine, a systematic worldview. Jefferson kind of did that in the United States. He was the one who put all these ideas together and created what became scientific racism, essentially the law of the land in terms of American culture and the way Americans have thought about race. Even to this day, but certainly until World War II, from Jefferson until 1945, that's the way pretty much all Americans thought about race. Some races of people are genetically, biologically inferior to others, period. And therefore, they should be treated differently and have different laws applied to them, etc. And that wasn't just blacks either. Of course, it was Indians, and then it was Japanese and Chinese and, they were all racialized. Mexicans for a while, Filipinos for a while, Jews and Italians and Irish before then for a while. And that's, of course, in my book, Renegade History. And I guess one way in which I'm different than leftists on this is that it doesn't bother me emotionally when I see racism, like real racism, unless it's directed at me or my son. And it like robs us from getting a job or a scholarship, which it's happened for both of us. He and I have both. I've been told it. In his case, I'm 99.9% sure it's happened to him. He didn't get certain things in his school, his university, that he totally would have if he were a different color. But I mean, of course, it bothers me when it actually affects people of any color in real life in that way. Of course, most of the so-called racism we talk about, like more than 90% of it in this country, is all thoughts and words, and zero material consequences or material impact on anybody in the real world. Anyway, I'm not morally offended by it, the way that leftists are sort of reflexively, which makes them very dumb about it. They're not able to talk about it, and that's why I'm so interested in it. Because no one's ever actually talked to the real racists, the actual intellectuals, who make it into a serious system of thought. It's not just hating black people. It's not just using the N-word. It's not, thinking hip hop is primitive. It's not. It's about a serious. I would call it a serious intellectual construct that began in the 18th century and became dominant for the next almost 200 years, and then got completely overthrown overnight after World War II. And we have not been allowed to even think that way for 1 minute since then. And which is such a strange thing to do as a society, to just turn on your heels on this massive concept that was guided much of like American thinking about everything until 1945. I mean, it accounts in large part for why we dropped the atom bomb. We had these very racialized ideas about Japanese as being subhuman savages, beasts, apes, rapists, all the rest of it. And so killing, millions of them was not such a big deal, kind of like what we're seeing now in Gaza. And by the way, again, like you just cannot explain, certainly at this point, you can't explain anybody's support or opposition to a ceasefire right now without resorting to racism as the explanation. I just don't, there's just no chance. You can't, there's no way you could oppose a ceasefire at this point without having racist views of Palestinians. Anyway, so, and by the way, that's sort of anti-Arab and especially anti-Palestinian racism currently, I think, is like the last, it's the last vestige of that good old scientific racism in the West. It's, of course, racism against blacks and Jews is almost literally illegal. It is illegal in Europe, and it's essentially culturally illegal in the United States. Same with Indians, same with, but Arabs and Palestinians, nah, clearly that's allowed. It just has to be presented in particular ways. So anyway, there's,
well,
we're going with
we
that.
brought up racism in basketball to talk about another now acclaimed Hoosier phenom, Caitlin Clark, getting beaten up by the League of Black Lesbians.
Man, I was brought right back to 7th grade because the exact same thing happened to me. It was rough in Berkeley, the first school district in the country to integrate forcibly, meaning it was involuntary. We were put on buses. This is 1970 when I was in kindergarten. We were the very first school district in the entire country to do forced busing for integration. And so all of us had to get on buses and go across town every morning at 7 a.m. and go like be in another neighborhood. And they achieved like this perfectly socially engineered racial utopia. No. What it meant for most white kids, and especially mouthy, know-it-all white kids like yours truly, was that we got our asses kicked a lot. No one was killed. I'm not sure anybody was put in the hospital even, but it was a lot of sort of daily low-key terrorism, a lot of intimidation and bullying and threats and making fun of us, and it was really interesting. I mean, what was the actual consequence of forced integration? And this is the reason I've always been opposed to that kind of integration and love voluntary integration, like the kind that you mess with, you know, in music, and in particular in Black music. That you see it most readily, and it's the most beautiful thing. I mean, well, to me, historically, I mean, those spaces, you know, musical spaces that are integrated are the most beautiful spaces ever, because those are, in many cases, almost perfectly integrated, right? I can think of so many examples in the history of music in America where I mean, all the way back to the colonies, where you had like saloons in which you had like Irish men and slaves, you know, Indians all dancing together and playing music together. But that's gone on to this day. I mean, in hip hop, you see it all the time. Disco was beautiful, incredible mosaic of people. So all that's voluntary, all completely voluntary, grassroots. It's just people choosing to get together over some shared interest or love, or because they like each other's culture. You know, I know that certainly a lot of white people have been super attracted to Black culture, and therefore they've gone to those saloons and those disco clubs and those hip hop clubs, and you know, voluntarily. So that's incredible.
Yeah. Oh, the door swings both ways too. There's a lot of Black interest in white culture. I think the grass is always greener on the other side.
No, I was going to say that as I was talking. The left never wants to talk about that, but of course, I mean, the number of fully assimilated middle class Black Americans in this country since the Civil War, or even before, really, is huge. And not all of them, but generally speaking, they have embraced, you know, white European WASP Puritan American culture. I mean, that the Black middle class historically has actually been extremely conservative, and very puritanical, very religious, very, very conservative socially, culturally, in all those ways. But that's, you know, it's been a minority among Blacks, but it's still been a significant number of people. And yeah, so they've in many ways, in many cases, like clearly aped, imitated white affect, culture, whatever. I mean, it's often self-consciously, like in the 19th century, like Frederick Douglass, I.D.B. Wells, those people said straight up, we need to adopt. Booker T. Washington, even W.E.B. Du Bois sometimes said, we need to adopt white culture. We need to act like that. Martin Luther King said it in 1957, 58. He gave a series of sermons to Black churches. He got up and told all these Black people. This is Martin Luther King in the South in the 1950s, said, we must adopt the norms of the dominant culture. That's a quote. Yeah, so you're right. It's gone both ways. Anyway, I'm just saying the difference between voluntary integration and forced governmental social engineering integration, I mean, it's night and day. There's one is gorgeous and the other is disgusting and hideous. And I was funny, in Berkeley, you had both. A lot of both. I mean, we were forcibly integrated, but there was a ton of voluntary integration. I mean, because we had a huge music scene here and a great youth culture and all that in the 70s and 80s. It was all very integrated and it was awesome. So I kind of saw it firsthand. I experienced both. I've known about both kinds of integration. People don't parse that. They think of integration as only one process, one kind of process. Usually they think of it as government enforced. But no, I mean, most of the integration we see is totally voluntary, spontaneous, and I think absolutely like beautiful and the best of America. That is where I love America the most, is in those spaces.
And you consider the WNBA one of those spaces, or do you consider?
Right. So I've never had a bad time really in a voluntarily integrated space like a nightclub. As I said, in the forcibly integrated spaces of schools in Berkeley in the 1970s and 80s, it was daily violence. No kidding. I mean, again, not like put you in the hospital violence, sometimes close to that, but you know, daily kind of terrorist violence. WNBA is of course voluntary to an extent, although once you're in it, you're somewhat of a slave because you don't have much, since it's a system of franchises with there's just really one owner, which is the league. In fact, it's not even the it's owned by the NBA, right? So it's like not even, wow. You know, so I think there is a plantation, especially in the WNBA, because the pay is not good. It's not a plantation, but there is less freedom, actually, less labor freedom as a player in the WNBA than in most other sports, and certainly in any other industry. I mean, what other industry do you like not get to choose which company you work for? It's insane. And then they can trade you. Your company can trade you to another, which is in another city at any time. Like, it's only in sports do we think that's cool. It is semi-slavery. And when it's the NBA, they make so much damn money, no one feels bad for them. But in the WNBA, I mean, if some of those women, I think, are making like 50, 40, 60 grand, something like that.
Yeah.
Not Caitlin Clark. I don't know what her deal was, but it's
no, it's like 70 grand. It's not that much.
She's making 70 grand?
I think so. I might be wrong, but I think her contract isn't much annually. I think most of her money is coming from endorsements. But yeah, the salaries aren't there yet. This will be the first year with a bunch of ticket sales. So they might have the capital after this year, but it sounds like they're outspending in promotion still. Like, it's yeah.
So let's talk about what's happening before Caitlin.
Well, yeah.
First of all, there's a huge debate. Like, if you follow sports media at all, which I do, that's pretty much all they've been talking about for about a month now, partly because the NBA is over and NFL is over, so there's not much to talk about in sports. But there's a huge debate going on among all of sports media, and it's in the regular media too. I mean, it's a big deal.
I think the WNBA in the last month has outshined the NBA Finals.
Oh no, they beat them. I think in ratings in some ways or something like that. I mean, it was, yeah, no, I mean and I was, yeah. So Caitlin Clark's been in the WNBA. She was the first pick overall in the draft. She was the biggest superstar in the history of women's college basketball in Iowa. And she was picked by the Indiana Fever, and everybody was predicting she would be a huge success. And most people were predicting she'd be the MVP, and the next she'd be the Michael Jordan of women's basketball. So she gets into the WNBA. I think she's played now 14 or so games. It's been like 2 months. And I've watched, I think, all the clips, and I've watched a few full games, in fact. She's been clotheslined. She's been hammered by an elbow on the top of her head when she was driving for a layup by Angel Reese. And then the most egregious was Kennedy Carter, who's a badass player, by the way. Some of these, they're getting good. Kennedy Carter is definitely worth watching. She reminds me of dudes I used to play on the street in street ball in New York City back in the day, like between the legs during a layup. Pretty awesome stuff. Anyway, Kennedy Carter walks up to Caitlin Clark's taking the inbound pass. She's like 5 feet from the baseline. Her teammate's trying to pass it, and she says her back's turned to her back. She's facing the baseline. Kennedy Carter comes up behind her and just shoulder checks her so hard that it knocks Caitlin Clark to the ground, to the floor. I mean, then there was like one instance where another player, Dejanay Carrington, who's like a Stanford player. So she's been in the intersectional classes. So she wrote some tweet about how Caitlin Clark is disgusting because she's allowing her name to be used by racists and sexists and homophobes and yada, yada, yada. I'm like, have I seen that? I mean, where is that? Anyway, but Dejanay Carrington during a game, what was it? Oh, Caitlin Clark is, I guess she's like trying to move to the baseline, and Carrington just like, I think, chests her head. And like, I didn't see anything. I mean, she just got her head just got snapped this way by Carrington putting her chest in her face really hard. And then Carrington does this whole like mocking thing to the referee, like mocking Caitlin Clark for being like flopping or something. I mean, it's just, I've never seen this level of abuse of a player in any professional sports league. And I've been watching sports since 1970. And I've watched every damn sport there is, and I've never seen any player get abused this regularly. I mean, I've seen in a single game, sure. In hockey, maybe. Not even in hockey. You don't see a player get abused over 12, 14 games. Over 2 or 3 games, of course, and certainly not in basketball. I've never seen this, and I've been watching hoops. I've been a huge hoops fan for 30 years now. I have never, college and pros, all of it, I've never seen a pro get treated this way. And then, so like, I'd say roughly 2/3 though, something like that, of the mainstream sports media, they're acting like it's cool. Like, it's fine, no big deal, and don't defend Caitlin Clark. That's patronizing, and which I like that argument. You know, that like being a little too concerned about her well-being is patronizing.
I mean,
but yeah, what do you think?
Well, I think people are more sensitive to it because it's girls, and watching girls get violent, you get like your impulse to care for them, and that patronizing impulse is there.
Right.
Yeah, but for the most part, I think she just gets the ball more, and she's driving to the basket more, and she's going to get more hard fouls because she has the ball all the time.
Oh, really? You don't think she's being targeted?
I think a couple instances she's gotten some like.
Oh my God, you're Stephen A. Smith now.
Yeah,
what happened to my boy? Did you become a liberal since last week? What happened to you?
Well, I think the worst part about white identity politics is white victimhood narratives. You basically adopt the exact same thing that you hate about Black identity politics.
So like, for instance, like my stories that I repeat all the time about being fired for being white. You mean like those things? You mean like that kind of thing? That's really disgusting.
Yeah.
Dude, it happens. Hello. It does happen. Not just to me. I mean, I don't think, of course, it's only in particular industries, most importantly, academia, where that kind of shit happens. I mean, in construction, I'm sure white guys are doing just fine. In real estate, I'm sure they're doing just fine. In most industries, they're doing just fine. There is no discrimination, I'm sure. In banking, there is no discrimination against white guys, I don't think, at the higher levels in banking. But in certain industries, Hollywood, the media, and academia, the ones that are run by the left. I mean, they're run by the left. And I mean, like the woke left, they're run by those people. And most importantly, they're run by those norms. And so trust me, like if you're a white guy in academia, well, you've been in academia, and you're nominally a white guy. It's a totalitarian. I mean, for white guys, it is like within academia, I'd say it's probably equivalent to the treatment of blacks in the North in the 50s, where it's not like there's not formal segregation, but there is pervasive, powerful, deep cultural and psychological segregation that shaped people's lives as much as any law. Like, it's true. You just can't, like, I know I can't apply for certain jobs because I'm white. And so you just stay away from them. And you're told that you're not going to get a job because you're white. Again and again and again. It happens in admissions. We know this. Why are you arguing with me?
No, it's just that that victim narrative and seeing yourself as a victim will destroy your soul. And yeah.
But I mean, yeah. Okay, fine. I mean, I didn't crawl up into a ball and die because of it. I didn't go into a fetal position. I wrote a damn book. That was a bestseller, motherfucker. Anyway, all right. Let's see. Let's talk about the end of the world.
Oh, well, sorry.
We're done. Are we done with the black section of the program?
Well, I just want to say the GOAT, Bill Laimbeer, in the Detroit Pistons. Every game was a street fight in the 80s back then.
Oh, I know.
So I think it's built into the game, and I think these hard fouls actually make the game entertaining, and it shows that people actually care about the game they're playing. It's more entertaining than the NBA, where everybody stays away from the superstars and doesn't even like breathe on them. And so to see people playing like a team and playing hard, it's entertaining, and it's actually how the sport has been played historically.
No. There were two. I mean, yes and no. I mean, yes, in general, in principle, of course, I agree with you, and I want to see them play like men play. If you're gonna play this sport, then play like men play. Play meaning well and aggressively, which is that's a huge part of being a good basketball player, is being aggressive. But no. I mean, the Kennedy Carter thing, it wasn't even a foul, and an Angel Reese, that elbow to the head, those are both assaults. I mean, because they really clearly, well, the Carter thing is obviously an assault. It's not like first degree assault, but it's an assault. Like if you did that to someone in pub on the sidewalk, you'd go to jail. And as you should. And the Angel Reese foul, the elbow to the back of the head, I mean, I can't remember the last time I saw. I mean, yes, Bill Lame Beer laid some of those on people. Actually, back in the '90s, I remember those well.
Mhm.
But that kind of became uncool for that very reason, because he was seen as just a thug who wasn't really playing basketball at times. I don't know. That foul by Angel Reese, I thought was just really gratuitous, egregious, and to me, that constitutes assault. I mean, and I've assaulted people in basketball games. I've done that, where I've been so pissed off. I mean, I'm talking about like when I was a kid, teenager, maybe, but like where I got so pissed off at somebody that I went after them and hit them with the elbow, just like she did. And I should have been punished in some way or another for it. It's not cool. So get off your like liberal high horse, white man. I can't. We like flipped roles. You're usually the racist. Yeah, I'm like
disrespecting my white queen. Well, not when it comes to women.
Thank you for clarifying. Poor Caitlin. The main thing is I just feel bad. You know what? I hate it when people are forced to be political when they clearly don't want to be.
Yeah, exactly.
She's
just playing the game.
That's her. She wants to play about. I mean, and do we want Caitlin Clark talking about politics, or do we want her shooting threes? Do we want her playing basketball? We don't. I don't care about Caitlin Clark's ideas. She probably has none, and that's great because we want her to play basketball because she's awesome at it. It's the passing, by the way. She got 12 boards, I think, last night, 2 days ago.
She's got
the passing. It's the vision and the passing that sets her apart. Yeah. The shooting's amazing, but like a lot of women shoot that well. She's no, it's her court vision and passing, and her handle. I would say too. Her handle's pretty solid. All right. So the world's gonna blow up, and here's why. Because there were 2 massive developments in this last week that very few people are like paying attention to sufficiently. I mean, yes, it's been in the news. People have talked about it, but I don't. They both make me actually a little sick to my stomach because they both mean together that the conflict between the U.S. and Russia and the conflict between the U.S./Israel and the rest of the world, which is what it is now, are going to continue and be probably even more vicious. So we'll do Ukraine first. We had back-to-back summits, conferences, not far from each other, one in Switzerland, one in Italy. The G7, G7 met first in Italy, a week ago, not even, less than a week ago. And then immediately after, well, then there was another side conference during that time when Zelensky and Biden struck their deal, made an agreement, which we'll talk about. Well, we'll just say it right now. The deal in broad strokes, which is all you need to know for this, is a 10-year security agreement with Ukraine by the United States. And then explicitly not spelling it out, but sort of explicitly saying this will lead to accession to NATO by Ukraine. So we essentially, I mean, I need to read the text of it, but as I understand it, we're now in essentially our own little NATO with Ukraine, which means that if they're attacked, we are obligated by the security agreement. That's what security agreements are, generally speaking, with the United States. The idea is you be our proxy over there. You do what we say. In exchange for, we prop you up. We send you weapons. We send you money. We say nice things about you in the UN. We will shoot down missiles directed at you. And you will, and we will defend. Yeah, we will defend you, and you will do what we say. So that's in Article 5, basically, with Ukraine. Article 5 in the NATO agreement says that if any member of NATO is attacked, every other member is essentially obligated to come to their defense. So we are now obligated by this treaty, I guess it is technically, with Ukraine to come to their defense if they, and of course that can always be construed in all sorts of ways. They can construe an attack in all kinds of ways. It doesn't matter. It's the same relationship we have. It's just been formalized and extended for 10 years. So we are tied to these fuckers for another decade. And so that's terrible because that is exactly why Putin went to war. That's exactly why Putin launched that invasion. That is precisely the cause of all of the conflict in Eastern Europe over the last 20 years, is the United States continuing to push eastward with NATO and having, now they've just sort of worked out their own private NATO with Ukraine. So it's not, I mean, it's essentially the same thing as having Ukraine in NATO. What's the difference? Because the United States, of course, runs and dominates and basically is NATO ultimately, because NATO is nothing without the US military. So that's what he accomplished. And this is, as I said, is exactly what sends the Russians ballistic, quite literally, because they have said for 20 plus years that that is the red line. They will not allow NATO in Ukraine. Please do not try that. We will have to go to war if you do that, because it will be a hostile military alliance on our border in a country that is very large and full of ethnic, cultural, and linguistic Russians who also mostly, overwhelmingly, want to be part of the Russian Federation. So please do not put NATO in that country. If you do, we will have to go to war to stop that from happening. That's February of 2022. That's the cause of this war. Everybody knows this who's not an ideologue for the West. And so this means that we will continue. Oh, and then on top of this, Zelensky, either at the Swiss conference or in Italy, I forget which one, doesn't matter. When I heard this, he was talking about 2025, meaning he's talking about fighting. He was making plans for fighting, for the war plans publicly. He said in summer 2025, we'll be doing X, Y, and Z on the battlefront when they've lost. So G7 meets, Zelensky and Biden have the side conference and make out this deal, which is going to it's just a path to either more of this or to the big showdown, the big WW3. But either way, it's just more war. Definitely guaranteed here. And then right in between the Swiss conference, the Peace Summit, and I forget, G7 was first, right?
Yeah.
They were right back to back. Doesn't matter. So the side conference of the G7, Zelensky and Biden come up with this deal to guarantee the security deal for 10 years. And the Swiss summit, which was a peace summit in Switzerland that was organized by Zelensky, basically, or called for by Zelensky. First of all, they invited, I think, 170 or 80 or maybe more countries to come. Not Russia, of course, because this was a Ukrainian peace summit. It's a complete bizarre stunt. And only 70 countries, I think, showed up. Like fewer than half the countries that were invited showed up, including basically all of the countries of the global south, like Brazil, like India, on and on and on. So it was a huge failure on that score. And then the worst thing, though, for the Swiss Peace Conference in Ukraine and Zelensky was that right in between, I think it was the day before the Swiss Peace Conference started, Putin, shrewd move, gives a speech in which he lays out a proposal for a ceasefire, essentially for a peace deal. And it was a very simple, straightforward proposal. You withdraw your troops from the 4 regions that we now occupy and control, essentially. The 4 formerly oblasts in the southeast of Ukraine that Russia has controlled basically since the start of the war, and certainly they control now. And you sign an agreement guaranteeing that you will never enter NATO. And that's it. And we're good. And we will. And he says, and then the best part is he says, I will order our military to cease fire immediately. That day, I think he says. That day, if you sign this, we will stop fighting. And I believe him. Why? Because these are exactly the demands he's had since the beginning of the war. That's it. He's always wanted that. The people of Eastern Ukraine overwhelmingly have always wanted that. But of course, so everybody at the Swiss Peace Conference, that's what they're talking about. And the whole world who follows this stuff was talking about Putin the whole time. My God, he put forward a real peace proposal. And of course, Zelensky and the peace conference, the Swiss Peace Conference, turned it down. Not just that, made fun of it, mocked it, shunned it. Of course, the United States said, this is a ridiculous proposal. We will never accept this. To which I say, American people, you really, really think it's in your interest to turn down Putin's peace offer? What exactly is going to happen to you living in San Diego or Kansas City or a suburb in New Jersey if Russia continues to has sovereignty over 4 regions of, I think, 20 something in Ukraine, in the southeast of Ukraine, and Ukraine can never join NATO again, and we Americans here, we have an interest in stopping that? You Americans, you right there in your SUV driving to the mall again, dropping off your kids, you Americans, you people, you're watching a lot of TV and you're on that social media all the time. As you're scrolling your Instagram, can I ask you a question, Americans? Would you like to, there's this war over here. No one here is getting killed, so I know you don't care. But just, whatever, if you have 5 seconds to think about this, just, an entire country, an entire generation of young men have been annihilated for this thing over here. And people are saying it's for us. This is for our security and peace and stuff. And so now we have a choice. We can stop that war. And here's the conditions of it. Would you like to stop the war based on Putin's conditions or not? Goddamn well, if you explain this stuff to like 99% of Americans, they'd say, of course, let's stop it. Why are we? This zombie empire run by neocon ideologues and their neoliberal colleagues like Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, they're just pushing this shit. And I'm not even sure they fully believe in it. Like, do they really believe in the global American empire, Pax Americana, American exceptionalism? We should restore American leadership, as Obama said in 2007. I don't know. They seem like they're running on autopilot, like they're zombies. It's a zombie empire. But that's where we are, everybody, because of their deep, almost genetic ideological commitment to the American global empire. Our government is not allowing that peace to happen. So that's really sad.
Remember when this war started and Ukraine being involved in NATO was a conspiracy theory?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
You mean, oh, right. You mean that it was a conspiracy theory that Ukraine would ever join NATO? You mean?
Yeah. That was ever the United States' intentions, that was ever Ukraine's intentions.
Oh, yeah. That Putin was paranoid.
Yeah.
Right? Putin's paranoid. Well, that's what they always say. Putin's paranoid. He's paranoid. Yeah. It's just a hostile military alliance has moved right up to the border of his country over the last 20 years and is 3 times bigger than it was when it started. And it was designed to fight the country that no longer exists. But now they're on the border. A hostile military alliance on your border. And what are you supposed to do as a nation state? Do we need to say anything more, guys? If China and Mexico had if Mexico and anybody had a military alliance and it was in Mexico on the border of San Diego and the border of Texas, do you think Americans would be chill with that? Do you think we would launch a special military operation into Mexico to dismantle that military apparatus, to make sure that there was no military alliance that's hostile to us on our border? Do you think we would have a special military operation into Mexico, everybody? Of course we would. Damn, even I probably would support that. That would be a case of actual self-defense. That would be one of the only cases in American history in which I would say, yes, that's real self-defense. And yes, we probably need to launch some military operation, an SMO, into Mexico to stop that from happening. Because those people clearly want to enter this country and take it over, which is what they've been saying. Oh, by the way, at the G7 conference, something like half of the panels and discussions are about, and this is the term they're using, decolonizing Russia. And I've been following this, and I said this on the show, I've been following this for about more than a year now. Think tanks, U.S. foreign policy think tanks in Washington. Go look at their they have podcasts on YouTube. Nobody listens to them or watches them, but if you go watch them, because that's where you find out what's really coming. They've been talking about decolonizing Russia for more than a year now, since the war started, really. And what it is it's about the analysis is, or the claim is, of course, that Russia is an old empire, which has all these republics attached to it, which is true. Of course, why is Chechnya part of the Russian Federation? I get it, sure. But what they're talking about is forcibly breaking apart the current Russian Federation. When you have Americans talking about decolonizing and breaking apart Russia, does that not sound like they're interested in some kind of an invasion, conquest? I mean, of course it does. At the very same time that they have moved their military alliance that hates you right up to your border, and they've been trying to move it up to the most important border you have. I mean, really, what I just said over the last 3 minutes is all anybody needs to know about this whole war. These people in the West who run American foreign policy want to take over Russia. They want regime change. They want a puppet government. They want to get rid of the current government, have a government that's favorable to us, that we can control, and they're willing to go to war and kill lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of people to get that. No one knows this is happening, but that's all that is happening. It's run by Victoria Nuland and her husband, Robert Kagan, essentially, and their lackeys in the State Department, like Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan. And they've gotten the entire liberal intelligentsia and establishment to go along with it, people who never knew about Ukraine before February of 2022. But, you know, they were taught very quickly what position to take. And so you had like all these actresses talking about if they were Putin's mom, what they would do, you know, how they would have made him a better person, knowing nothing about any of this shit. It's an incredible, once again, another massive psyop in service of a huge destructive war, killing lots of people halfway across the world that doesn't affect Americans. And so Americans let it go. And we continue to vote on stupid issues like trans stuff and this, you know, all these ridiculous side issues that are like almost trivial. And no one ever brings up what's really going on, the really bad stuff, the real killing and dying and massive economic restructuring too for these wars, the losses, the financial losses that are absolutely astronomical in all these wars. We don't, you know, how many billions have been sent to Ukraine? Oh, here's another great thing, Michael Weimer. There have been reports, including in the Financial Times, which is super pro-Ukraine, total globalist establishment, you know, UK paper, about in the last, I think, 6 months or so, there have been reports from all over the globe, countries all over the world, of Ukrainian capital showing up, money, huge amounts of money showing up in various countries and investing in various projects or real estate or banks or whatever it is, like vast amounts of money from Ukraine being distributed, dispersed across the world. Like, and this is what we knew this was going to happen. The most corrupt government in Ukraine, in Europe, was Ukraine. When the war started, then we funneled billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars into that very government. And what do we expect will happen? Zelensky and his colleagues in the government there are going to have awesome mansions in Miami to retire to when the war's over. And lots of weapons will be sold on the black market that might shoot down a jetliner over Europe at any moment. Oh, yes, I've been worried about this. I've been worried about flying in Europe since then, since the war started, because we knew that all these missiles, these surface-to-air missiles, were being sold on the black market that were stolen from the Ukrainian government, that were given to them by the United States of America. We just flooded them with this stuff. And there's a bunch of corrupt gangsters who are also fighting a war. So they're desperate, you know, in various ways. So they'll do all sorts of deals. And so we're seeing black market weapons all over the place, all the way down to Africa. We've seen weapons that were sent to Ukraine end up in Africa. Are you trying to tell me there isn't somebody who has some Stinger surface-to-air missile somewhere in Europe that can shoot down an airplane? Of course. But we're seeing all this cash that we sent them. What is it now? More than 100 billion or something. All this cash or weapons that have been transferred into cash appear all over the world because all these guys got really, really, really rich from our tax money. At the same time, you can go watch videos of Ukrainian graveyards, military graveyards, hundreds of videos of people driving by the graveyards, just rows and rows and rows and rows and rows of graves of young men stretching to the horizon. Hundreds of them all across Ukraine. Ukraine has become a country of graveyards. The estimates are, if you're on the Ukraine side, it's low. It's about 300,000 dead. If you're on the pro-Russian side, or you're sort of independent, it's around, you estimate about 500,000 Ukrainian dead. For what? You lost. Russia controls the place, controls the southeastern part of Ukraine. They haven't given up territory there since the beginning of the war. Donetsk and Luhansk have been Russian completely in every single way since February of 2022. Kherson and Zaporizhia, damn near the same thing. Why? Stop it. Let Russia have it. Stop killing. Stop spending our money on this for your fantasy about whatever it is, dismembering, decolonizing Russia and having an American base in Russia. That's what they want. These freaks who run American foreign policy. That's what the vision is. And this is it. I just said it to you. That's what they want. They want military bases inside Russia. They want U.S. military bases inside Russia, like every other country that we control. Look at a map of the world. We have military bases in every single country we have any relationship with. They want military bases inside Russia, meaning they just want to extend the American empire more, further. For 150 years, these people have been extending the American empire across the world. Look at a map of the military bases, except into two places, Russia and China. The Eurasian landmass, which Brzezinski and Mackinder before him, the foreign policy gurus for the United States establishment for a century, have said, you must control that landmass. You must do anything you can to control that landmass. And so they're still trying. Tony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, Victoria Nuland, Hillary Clinton's the acolytes who work in the State Department or wherever, that's what they're still after. They're still after that Brzezinski-Mackinder objective of controlling the Eurasian landmass. Unfortunately, that requires displacing two massive state governments, Russia and China. But that's what they're doing. That's why Taiwan is hot. That's why Ukraine is hot. So that's that. That's the Eastern Europe scene, heading to war faster and faster and faster. Then in Israel, Netanyahu disbanded the war cabinet 5 days ago, which was not surprising because Benny Gantz, who was part of the 5 members, I think it is 5 or 6 members, who are the guys who actually like run the war. They're the ones who really set policy, you know. Benny Gantz comes from the labor side, meaning sort of the liberal Zionist side in Israel. I mean, totally for ethnic cleansing, anti-Palestinian, but like there's a liberal Zionism and there's a Netanyahu right-wing Zionism. The war cabinet had him and I think another laborite in there. And so they were starting to rebel. Gantz was openly rebelling against Netanyahu. So he cleared them out, disbanded them, dissolved them, and hasn't replaced them yet. But who do you think he'll replace them with? I mean, he's not going to replace them with nice liberals who want to kill fewer Palestinians. The thing that's interesting, and this is really interesting, and this could be the end, I mean, for Israel, I think, is that the right wing, and I've been following the right wing in Israel in the last few weeks.
Well,
if you guys go ahead. Yeah, man.
The war cabinet, like, they weren't liberals themselves. They weren't fired for being liberals. I think they were fired for just making baseline criticisms of Netanyahu being incompetent and how he's running the war.
No, Gantz wanted a closer relationship with the U.S. and he wanted to basically abide by their requirements of not going so hard. Mm-hmm. That's what I mean by liberal Zionists. That's what that means now. It means like killing, 5,000 babies instead of 10,000. But that's what the American government wants, right? That's what Biden wants. It's like he just wants fewer babies killed. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Oh, totally. No. It's not even at the level of strategy. Yeah. It's not even at the level of strategy. Yeah, no, for sure. But there is a difference, and I'm saying, Netanyahu Jesus. I mean, the arrogance. But like, I don't blame him in some way. That video that Netanyahu put out from his office a few days ago, like, totally blasting Biden for withholding some arms sales. I'm like, you little bitch. Like, wow. I mean, but so they think this is huge. Again, Israelis are on a different planet right now than the rest of us. They don't, which I partly understand. I mean, sure, they're at war and people get crazy. But there's an epistemological thing going on where like Israelis and the Israeli government simply do not see the world the way that the rest of the world sees it now. And you can kind of see like American Zionists getting nervous for them right now a bit. But he blasts Biden and the entire Israeli right wing is blasting Biden. Oh, they think Biden is anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist and anti-Israel now. Oh, no, they say this. The right wing.
Well,
so anyway,
that's what Trump says. That's what,
Sure. Yeah. Right. But I mean, they really believe it is my point. And so like the entire right wing of Israeli politics, which is 60 or 70%, something like that of the Knesset, they're the dominant wing without a doubt. It is the Israeli political establishment is solidly right wing. There is a massive movement, and I've actually seen it percolate into American mainstream politics, and I'll talk about that in a second. That is not just anti-American, but they are calling for, guess what, everybody, the United States to stop funding Israel because the United States exerts too much control over Israel with this funding, with this support, military support, etc. To which I say, amen, you're right. Let's go. Yeah. And so I'm going to tweet this.
You're talking about Zionists making the critique that American aid comes with too many strings attached to it, and we could do our war much more efficiently and quicker if we did it independently.
Good luck.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe in the short term you can, but this is, so I've been saying this, and I said this in a tweet maybe a week ago, like the entire Palestine solidarity movement, I'm talking about all you guys, all the communists, all the Islamists, whoever you are, like, just all we should do to have a real coalition that can win, please. And I'm saying, by the way, those are minor factions within the Palestine solidarity movement, but they're there. And unfortunately they control the damn protests. They do. Communists, not Islamists, but anyway, they do. Wow. Here's the thing, guys. We actually have gotten to the point. We have gotten to the point where the Palestine solidarity movement, the Palestine solidarity movement has a massive agreement with the right-wing Zionists, which is, yes, the United States should stop its support of the state of Israel. And that's the end of it, because when the United States stops really supporting it, now that includes military support. And I did notice that these people who are calling for the United States to stop funding Israel don't talk, sometimes they specify, this doesn't mean the United States shouldn't help us militarily. Anyway, still, it's a huge concession. It's not even a concession. They want these are like hardcore Zionists. They really want Jewish sovereignty and independence and autonomy. I'm like, cool, great, do it. Good luck. Good luck, bros, without a superpower behind you, because you had the British, then you had the French, and then you had us. And you've had us since 1967, funneling every goddamn weapon and dollar bill we could into your country. But so let's take it away from you. And I've had arguments in person with many Israelis about this, and it's so funny. They're so arrogant. It's like they'll do this thing where they'll say, oh, we don't need help. We've done it all on our own. We've done it all on our own. 48, we fought the Arab armies all by ourselves, which is sort of true. Kind of. I mean, the British had done all kinds of things to help the Zionists. But anyway, but they have this thing where like, oh, no, we don't need your help. And then they'll be like, oh, it's only $3 billion a year. Fine. Okay, then we agree. Let's cut it off. And what I will say to Israelis is, you better move real fast, because once the United States is no longer your daddy, I don't see how you're going to survive. Because did you not notice the drone footage that Hezbollah put out a few days ago? Did you see this? The drone footage over Haifa? They had a drone, Hezbollah, which has tens of thousands of missiles all along the border with Israel, tens of thousands of missiles that can hit Jerusalem, that can hit Tel Aviv, can hit Haifa, can hit anywhere into Israel. And by the way, everyone agrees on this. Israelis say this. We all agree. Hezbollah can fuck Israel right up with its missiles. But we didn't know if they could like land them, get them into Israel. We didn't know if they could target necessarily accurately. Well, Hezbollah, and this thing chilled me. Like if I lived in Israel or in Haifa especially, I really would have been thinking about moving. There's a drone. They sent a drone. Hezbollah sent a drone over Haifa, and you can see, everybody look it up if you haven't seen it yet. There's like high resolution video imagery of civilian neighborhoods, military installations, the port, everything in Haifa, the third largest city in Israel. And this drone just cruised over Haifa for a long time, just taking its leisurely time, photographing, videotaping everything in great detail, looking right down into Haifa. I'm serious. I mean, I have friends in Israel. I just want to say, Michael, Adar, like, don't you want to reconsider? I mean, honestly, I mean, in the next year, you're probably fine, but 2, 3, 5 years, this is a game changer and possibly checkmate. So what we have is, in the meantime, right? Oh, and sorry, to connect it all, the right wing in Israel that I've been talking about that wants no U.S. support anymore, what's the other thing they're calling for right now? They're calling for, and this is about half of the Israeli political establishment, okay? They're calling for an invasion of Lebanon. They're calling for an invasion of Lebanon now, which has happened before. And what happened? The last time Israel was in Lebanon was in 2006, when they got destroyed by Hezbollah and driven out entirely of the country. And since then, Hezbollah has gained all these long-range missiles that they didn't have before. And they have this badass commando unit called the Red One that have been training for a decade to invade Israel on the ground. I mean, but just the missiles alone. So, and of course, Gaza's going on the whole time. The IDF is obviously like preoccupied with Gaza, killing as many babies as it can. But now they got this serious second front that is looming. And there's been missile exchange since the war started, by the way, between Hezbollah and northern Israel. But now we're looking at the right wing in Israel wants to go to war. They want to invade Lebanon at the same time they're at war in Gaza. And we all know that Iran funds and supports Hezbollah. So here we go, guys. This is the game plan by Netanyahu that he's been playing. All of Likud, even some of the labor people in Israel. I mean, most Israeli politicians have been playing this game, and they've had close allies in the United States like John Bolton, maybe you could say Tony Blinken, but certainly like the right wing pro-Israel neocons. Here's the play that they are getting closer and closer to achieving. They want the U.S. to go to war with Iran directly. They have for more than a decade. And Trump was the guy who got them closer to that than anyone else. And that's why they love Trump, the Israeli government. That's why they love Trump and they want him to win. And many people have said they're trying to extend the war to November to get to Trump presidency because they think they'll have a free hand then. So if you have, the right wing in Israel wants an Israeli invasion of Lebanon, a direct war with Hezbollah, which of course would cause Iran to step in and intervene and step up shipments of weapons, etc., and advisors probably to Hezbollah, etc. And then Israel, what do you think Israel's going to say? We need you to kill Iran for us. And it'll become the cause célèbre in the media for a while. And there will be more pressure placed on the U.S. government to go to war with Iran than ever before since 1979. Ever before. And we are closer to that than ever before. We're not there yet, but if Israel actually goes into Lebanon, and I'm not saying they will, but I am saying that the dominant faction in Israeli politics wants that and is calling for it. So it's very possible. If they do that, then we're only one step away from a direct war between the United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is the 5th or 6th or 7th, something like that, largest military in the world. I mean, of course we would destroy them and win in that way. We would inflict more damage on them than on us, for sure. But to like occupy, change the regime of Iran, that requires troops on the ground. Just
Well,
yeah.
Afghanistan was 20 years and nothing happened. Right. Iraq was, 15 years? Really 30 if you think about the whole project.
Yep.
Pretty much nothing happened except we just destroyed the place.
Yeah, just lots of damage.
Yeah.
Right. Which is that's what I think would happen. Yeah. And a war with Iran would be similar. It would just be like lots of bombing for sure. And I'm not even sure they would send in ground troops. I don't know, but they would sure bomb the crap out of it, kill a bunch of people, sanction the fuck out of it. I don't know how they could do a ground invasion. Maybe some like targeted special ops things here and there, but just kill a bunch of people, fuck up the infrastructure of Iran. Like they've done. I mean, that's the way they roll since Iraq 3, since 2000, since the Iraq War. They gave up on ground troops and occupations and all that. They know, and also since 60% of young men in America are obese or something like that, they can't field an occupying army anymore. Like quite literally. Mm-hmm. This is the one good thing to say about the obesity epidemic. The United States can physically no longer field an occupying army. We just don't have enough young men to do it. I mean, they might snatch you, but they need like about at least 500,000 guys like you to occupy a country.
Well, bringing that up, all boys 18 to 26 are now automatically signed up for the draft.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, my girlfriend, who is the mother of two currently draft age young men, and one who will be draft age in 3 years, who is the most non-political person you will ever know. She saw that on her timeline or whatever and came right to me and said, "What is this? What is this?" And I said, it's not fundamentally different than what my son and I and you were subjected to, which was a requirement by law to register for selective service when we were in college, right? And that was, if you refuse, like ultimately it's punishable by jail time. I mean, if you don't, it's a fine, and then if you just continue to refuse, you go to prison. So it's serious. So it's not that much different, but I think number one, because they've had recruiting problems for a while now. So it's both obesity issues, it's also video games, and that's why you'll see every single Army and Marine Corps ad that you'll see on TV is very deliberately in the motif of a video game. It's amazing. I mean, they make the Army and the Marine Corps look like a video game because every kid, damn near every, certainly boy in this country, or 90+% play video games a lot, which makes them out of shape. They're not into, they don't do real physical stuff anymore. They don't play football anymore. They're not into violence anymore, like that kind of violence. The traditional training grounds from the military are gone, or they're fading. And kids are sedentary, and they do like boys do their violence, their aggression sort of through video games.
Why did the military never address the boyhood crisis?
They should have.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Why was there never an actual... Yeah.
They should have had Warren Farrell, my friend, who's been on the show a couple times, who wrote the book, The Boy Crisis, I think it's called.
Yeah.
They should have been... Well, I think he has been a consultant, actually, for some, but not them. They should have been a consultant for them.
Yeah.
Maybe even Jordan Peterson. I mean, yes, it's right. That's correct. Christina Hoff Sommers. I mean, I don't like Peterson or Hoff Sommers on most things, but on this, they're right. Because I've seen it. My son was born 22 years ago, right at the beginning of this war on boys. And I saw it. I mean, and then my girlfriend's sons, same thing. I mean, they're all, you can see that they've all been through institutions that deliberately neuter boys. They do not allow expressions of masculinity, and they've learned this. They've internalized it. It's not okay. And I had it early on too, but now it's really systematized. It's really part of the curriculum. In any kind of liberal school, private or public, they do not allow masculinity.
Yeah.
And so the military is screwed. They're screwed. I mean, like, Jesus, you're not going to get these like feminized boys to fight in some war across the world. Like, what? Are you kidding me? Half of them are like gender fluid now. Yeah. What do you think they're going to put on a uniform and go fight in some country somewhere they never heard of? You need the corn-fed boys of yore, you know, who had never heard of Germany or Japan, but they were down to fight for the country because there was nothing going on in Nebraska where they were from, and they played football.
When you were encouraged to bring your gun to school, you know, like when there was actually like shooting courses in school, and like
where has military recruitment come from? Traditionally, it's come from the South, the Midwest, and immigrants, but especially the South and the Midwest. And so part of that, and a big part of that, is that since World War II, and this is something people don't know, huge thing people should know about. Before World War II, there were almost no military bases in the South. And so I've said this before World War II, therefore, draft resistance and opposition to wars and isolationism and all that good stuff was centered in the South. You had amazing resistance to the draft. I mean, like armed uprisings against conscription for the wars in the South before World War II. World War II, they figured it out. They were like, oh, wait a minute. Those people are poor down there. They need jobs. They're patriotic sort of reflexively. So let's put all our military bases down there. So Parris Island, the Marine base, and all, look at Georgia, look at Alabama. There's bases all over the South now, and have been for my entire lifetime. And so, of course, they're literally dependent on those bases for their economic livelihood. And so many people down there are dependent on them for their jobs. And, you know, very quickly, the American flag starts flying over your head, and you start supporting this war and that war and the other war because you're just part of that system. That's what they did to the South. First, they invaded them in 1861 and tried to convert them to their way of life. And they did it again in the 20th century. The progressive imperialists were like, oh, now we're going to invade them again. We're going to occupy them again after 45 with our military bases, make them dependent like a colony, like the Philippines was, right? We had nothing but huge military bases in the Philippines for like 100 years. And so the entire Philippine economy was dependent on us, and therefore they were subservient to us. South, same way. So bases all over the South, millions of people in the South are employed in some way or another, or gain their livelihood in some way or another from military bases in the South. You know this if you've ever been there. And of course, that changed the culture, and they became pro-war because they kind of had to be. They kind of had to be. And Trump is the one who kind of put a little break on that with his speech in 2015 in South Carolina during the Republican primary, in which he gets on stage and the audience was like half veterans. South Carolina, the most right-wing state in the country, the most and gives these speeches about against regime change wars and against NATO, and he's getting standing ovations. So that's why Trump was exciting to me and other people, and he still is to some extent, because he did sort of see that there is actually some discontent, even in the South, about this giant American imperial project that has colonized the South. Not that he would talk about it that way, and no one in the South would talk about it that way, but that's what's going on.
Well, Ron Paul was #1 with active duty service and veterans in 2008
totally.
and 2012, broke records, fundraising records off their backs.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, and then for me, like even me, you know, a sort of minor subsidiary of all that. God, I mean, I can't. It's the number of people who were like fans of my book or my podcast or whatever who started out as opponents of the Iraq War, or were Ron Paul people or whatever. I mean, but veterans, like people. I've had so many people who have been interested in my stuff who were veterans in Iraq and Afghanistan who have been on the show. So yeah, there's a big, huge movement within the military itself and within places like that Scott Horton talks about this all the time. He's been on this beat for a long time, talking to right-wing conservative Southern audiences, many of whom are veterans, with an anti-imperialist, anti-war message, and he gets a big following among them. Scott Horton has a huge audience of veterans, people who used to wear the flag carrying a gun in foreign nations, and now they're against the whole thing, and they want to bring all the troops home and close all those bases. Yeah. So anyway, on the world scene, though, this has been an especially scary, grim, depressing week because of these developments in Ukraine and in Israel that pretty clearly make it look like both those conflicts are going to increase in intensity, because the war cabinet for Netanyahu is going to get even more right-wing, and because Zelensky has dug in and Biden has dug in for the long term to continue to fight, even making war plans for a year from now and making a security agreement for 10 years from now. So I'm super sorry to say this, but unless there is some other major change, which could happen, but as things stand right now, and this really almost makes me sick to say this, but I just think things are going to get even more vicious and more people are going to die. There'll be more fighting, maybe on new fronts even, probably with Hezbollah, maybe with Iran. Who knows what's going on in Ukraine, because all sorts of countries are involved there, and any one of them could become an active, direct belligerent at any moment, like Poland, for instance, which has troops operating clandestinely, wearing Ukrainian uniforms, but they're Polish troops inside Ukraine. I mean, further and further and further NATO country implication, involvement directly in that war, which of course is all just one fat trigger for Article 5, which then would technically make us all obligated in this country to go to war against Russia. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. And I don't even have an answer to that stuff. I mean, protests in the street aren't going to stop that. This is the machinations of the world leadership, in particular the US government and its subordinates in these countries.
No,
so
yeah.
I don't, yeah.
This is the logical end of decades of dumb rhetoric being official policy. Like, you were talking about Netanyahu's confidence, and like when Netanyahu visited Congress in 2012, he got 26 standing ovations in a 39-minute speech. So, of course, you're going to do whatever you want to do with impunity if that's how you operate. If it's basically illegal to criticize you. You brought up Trump and Iran. The audience has been getting annoyed at how much I bring up Nick Fuentes, but I don't think he gets the credit he deserves in a lot of ways. I agree. I think people were sharing like Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, and Candace Owens as like the top 3 podcasts on Spotify. And I don't think you have the space for them to talk the way they do without Nick Fuentes carving it out for them like 6 years ago. And to be as extreme as he is, but America First PAC, his meeting that he does for 4 years in a row now after being kicked out of CPAC, and after being kicked out of Turning Point, all that. It was held in Detroit, but the venue kicked him out. So he just, in great Nazi fashion, bullhorn to the street. And this was what he had to bullhorn to the street of followers that couldn't actually have a meeting.
We voted for Donald Trump because we don't want any more wars in the Middle East. And we don't want a war with Iran now. No more wars! 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 I will not vote for Donald Trump until he can give a commitment that we will not go to war with Iran. Because we know that there is something terrible happening in the Middle East. Israel, through war, through revolution, through subterfuge, is destabilizing the Middle East to carve out a path for greater Israel.
Down with Israel!
It's always been their plan. And right now, in order to accomplish that, they are committing a genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza. And it is a genocide. Why won't the people in Turning Point USA call it what it is? This is not a war. Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza, and they're doing it with our money, with our bombs, with our weapons that we gave them.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Amazing. And I gotta say, I listened to Candace Owens on Piers Morgan just a couple days ago. And boy, there are some things that Candace Owens says about various topics that just are the opposite of who I am. But when she got going on Israel and Gaza, it was some of the best rhetoric I've heard on my side of this. She just flamed the whole thing, and people who support the war, and in ways that I wouldn't. I mean, of course she has totally different politics, and that's why she sees it. She's opposed to it in slightly different ways, but it comes down to, and she says this, is she just saw a bunch of babies being blown up, and then lots of, and they kept going, just more every day. And I just saw a video today or yesterday of I saw 3 kids with their heads exploded.
Yeah.
I mean, heads blown, with babies, heads blown, just today and yesterday, 3 at least. Oh, and one young boy, probably 6, 7, 8 years old, his both legs were completely destroyed, and half of his head was blown off, and he was writhing on the operating table, and there was 4 or 5 guys around him trying to comfort him, and he was dying. And that's every day, and it's been every day since October 7th. And that's where she started, and she was pregnant, I think, when it started, or had just given birth. And I get it. Boy, do I get it. But then, credit to her, like a lot of people on the right, she knew nothing about this stuff. She knew nothing about Israel, Gaza, Hamas, none of this stuff. And she set about to learn about it. And she had Norm Finkelstein on her show, I think within a month or two. An amazing moment, an amazing move. And learned a lot. And no, she's not like a world expert on it, but she knows enough. She knows enough to have a real, honest to God, American, compassionate take on it, and the only American compassionate take on this is to stop the fucking war and to stop supporting Israel. And her politics ultimately are exactly mine, which is that if America has nothing to do with this thing, if America is no longer participating in any way at all with the Zionist project, then fine, go for it. Zionists, Israel, go, please, have at it. Have your Jewish ethno-state in the middle of Arab world, and good luck. Good luck. I hope that the people I like who live in Israel will get out, and I will encourage them to do that. And I call for, and I have called for, and I was made fun of this by Zionists on Twitter. Yael Bartour and Eli Lake thought it was hilarious that I said the United States is obligated ethically for having propped up this colony for 57 years now, since 1967, propped it up, made it viable. I think we, the United States, are obligated ethically to help those people leave. Which I know Israelis think that's funny because they live in Tel Aviv and everything is cool and they have skyscrapers and everything is awesome and they're rich and they just had Pride Parade and who cares? We're not going to go down. But no, did you see the drone video, the footage from Hezbollah looking right into your city? and they've got huge missiles pointed exactly at you, thousands of them, and most importantly, the entire world hates your fucking guts right now. The world hates your guts right now. The only people who don't hate the guts of Israelis right now are half the Democratic Party and the Republican Party leadership in the United States. There is nobody else in the world who isn't anti-Israel kind of violently at this point. Man, we need, the United States government is obligated to, I think, if I were in Congress, and this would be like basically the only social welfare legislation I would ever support, maybe, the United States should stop all of its funding for Israel, of course, and then convert that money and then add more money to it to build a fund to give lots of money to any Israeli citizen to emigrate with, to resettle in some other part of the world. We should take the money we've been giving to Israel and put that into a fund to just give cash payments. Any Israeli citizen, I think we owe it to them, especially anybody who was born there since 48. It's not their fault. They have zero fault in this, but we, the United States, made it so that they could live in that colony safely until now, promising them enduring safety because of our beneficence. No, I mean, we are the colonial masters ultimately of Israel, and therefore I think ethically we have a responsibility to those people. I mean, I'm talking about $1 million each, maybe more. Like, sure, whatever it takes. Like, they deserve that. I do think that. If the right-wing Likud, not the settlers, because they're going to die, they're going to go down with the ship, which is fine with me. I've never seen a more disgusting, fascistic, aggressively social movement, political movement in my lifetime anywhere in the world. I mean, those people, the Israeli settlers in the West Bank, are pure racist, fascist, aggressive imperialists. I mean, they are everything that is dangerous and bad in the world, and they are aggressive about it. But besides those people, generally speaking, Israelis, especially the ones who, again, were born there, the Sabras, they're called, who were born after independence, after 48. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to see them hurt. We have no reason to subject them, but we are subject by our foreign policy, which created this mess ultimately and made them ultimately unsafe by supporting this colonial crazy project in the middle of Arab world for 5-6 decades. Yeah, I think we owe them an escape. They're going to need it. I really think so. When Hezbollah put out that drone video, I was like, oh shit. Okay, this is scary. This is getting really close. Not to mention Syria, not to mention the resistance militias all across Iraq and Syria, not to mention Iran, which is funding much of this. Oh, Saudi Arabia, MBS, just came out with a scathing denunciation of Israel, which is big because he just was the Abraham Accords guy, right? He's the one who made this whole amazing, historic, unprecedented deal with Israel. He kind of led that. And he was going to say, he said, fuck the Palestinians. I'll have a deal with Israel. It'll help us economically. We'll have trade deals with them. It'll be all good. We'll just let the Palestinians rot in Gaza and the West Bank. Well, he came to Jesus this week and he came up with this massive denunciation of Israel. So I don't know where Israel's going to go now. They're cornered, baby. I mean, you don't even have America anymore necessarily. I mean, you have, again, I said, you don't even have the establishment in America. You have like a half of the establishment. You have State Department defections every week. You have one State Department official after another leaving the State Department in protest, going on Democracy Now! And denouncing Joe Biden for his Gaza policy. Every week, there's a new person from the U.S. government who's leaving in protest over this stuff. You know that like more than half the Democrats, something like, what is it, 70 or 80% of Democrats think it's genocide, are opposed to supporting Israel, are huge portions are even pro-Hamas. Even a chunk of the Republican Party is not happy with this stuff. So Israel, guys, please look around. And I'm thinking about having some Israelis on my show, or because I want to ask them directly, aren't you seeing what the rest of us are seeing? We think your country is in very deep trouble and will not last very long. Again, not a year or two, But 5 to 10 years, I don't see it. I really don't see Israel lasting as a Jewish ethno-state for more than 5 or 10 years. I don't. But the problem is, in the meantime, and the way they're choosing to go out is in flames. And that's what's terrifying. If they go to war with Hezbollah, I don't know. I mean, that's just catastrophic for all of us, because that means the US will become involved. Iran will become involved. Yeah. Anyway. All right. We're over time.
Yep. Yeah. So are we going behind the paywall now?
Yep. If you want to be fancy and be with the cool kids, come hang out with us. Become a patron. We have a Zoom meeting right now that we go to and hang out after Unreported every week. And all you got to do is be a $5 a month patron. Damn, that's cheap. And just go to patreon.com/unregistered right there. Become a patron at any level, 5 and up. If you want to become an Unregistered Academy patron, you can take our courses on Nietzsche and fascism, which just dropped. And then hang out with us for a long time, just chilling on Zoom after Unreported every Thursday. There you go, Michael. This has been great. Thank you for your patience with me.
The Max Blumenthal, Michael Tracy episode is now up on Patreon right now. Behind the paywall.
Okay. We didn't mention this. So Icarus Festival, the very first panel at Icarus Fest was with Michael Tracy and Max Blumenthal on the question of whether the American empire is over. And it's one of the best discussions I've had in a long, long time. It got kind of wild and heated. Some fighting with the audience. Tremendous discussion with Max and Michael. So yeah, it's on Patreon, and you can only see it if you're a patron. So yeah, we have now 2 incentives for everyone to become a patron. So cheap. You can watch that amazing video, and you can hang out with us on Zoom on Thursday nights. So go to patreon.com/unregistered. Check out Max Blumenthal and Michael Tracy and Thaddeus Russell at the Icarus Fest, and have a good time with us. All right, man. We're good. Thank you, dude. Yes.
Yeah. Check out Max's stand-up set on the Gray Zone.
Oh my God. Yeah. Gray Zone channel on YouTube. They posted it. It's Max live from Icarus Fest. That's the title of it. So you can find it. Tremendous. I think it's a 20-minute set we gave him. We had 400 people in that audience that night. Massive crowd. Tremendous show. Max killed it. Strongly recommend it, because the audience here will understand his politics. So Max is a tremendously talented stand-up comic. Of course, it's all political, but it's phenomenal. So check that out on the Gray Zone. And Michael, you're the man. Thank you.
That's it.
We're out.
Peace.